Okay, we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Commissioners, over the last several months, we've had the pleasure of meeting many of the Leadership Development Program participants. We have them with us today. This is our last of the 2016 graduating class, and I know I speak on behalf of the board when I say that we have enjoyed having you all here. And if you would, I want you to stand, introduce yourself, tell us where you work and how many years you've been with KUB.
Hello, my name is Michael Brown, Department 53, Underground Construction. I'm a construction tech, and I've been with them 16 years.
My name is Steve Klettenberg. I work in Department 83 in plants operations. Been with KUB a little over 9 years, and currently the team lead over 4th Creek and Lowe's Creek and East Bridge.
I'm Stephanie McKenzie. I work with our grid modernization department, and I've been with KUB 10 years.
Hi, my name is Juan Molina, Department 63. Overhead construction and alignment for KUB, and I've been here for 4 years.
Brad Powell, Manager Procurement Department, and I've been a part of KUB for 17 years.
I'm Mike Rose. I'm in Security, Safety, and Tech Services as an analyst. I've been here 8 years.
Well, welcome. And I want to say I saw Mike Brown when I walked in. Usually when I see Mike Brown dressed like that, there's a guitar in his hand. There's some singing, and it's usually about to go down, so I'm a little disappointed the guitar. We can arrange it. Okay, well, welcome. Mr. Coley, did you note that all the commissioners are here?
So noted.
And the minutes were sent out. If there's not any corrections, can I have a motion and a second? So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We're going to move straight into the official action. We actually have 4 resolutions to hear today, and it's Resolution 1342, 1343, 44, and 45.
Commissioners, I'll remind you, and for the record, that we met for about 3.5 hours last month and reviewed in detail the programs that support our budget. And today we're going to have a summary of the budget items as well as the funding items. It's going to be a tag team presentation. John Williams will do the budget items and Mark Walker will do the funding and commitment appropriations. To make it easy for you though, when we finish all that, Mark will have 4 different slides that give you the background for each of the resolutions that you will be asked to vote on. So you don't really have to remember the numbers that Nikisha just gave you. Those will be put up each time that you're being asked to vote. So I'll recognize John Williams.
I thought that was going to be a test.
We don't want to test you all.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. As you indicated, much of this that I'll be going through this afternoon is something you saw in April, and nothing's changed. So I'll provide the high-level view of the budget proposal before Mark talks about the funding recommendations and commitment appropriations. Commissioners, the $894 million budget allows KUB to continue its role in fulfilling the vision set forth by the board, provide safe, reliable, and affordable services to our customers. Our employees, our management team, members of our leadership development group have worked very diligently over the years in finding ways we can manage costs and reducing costs and operate more efficiently. And certainly this year allowed us to present a budget that is essentially flat with less than a 1% increase over last year. At the same time, it also allows us to continue funding our key programs such as Century 2, and also as we begin our first year of our grid modernization effort and the deployment of the first 4 years of advanced meters. Also in this budget, I'll remind you that it includes the rate increases previously approved by the board for fiscal year 17, and that includes the electric and the water increases that will be reflected on the August bills, and the gas and wastewater increases reflected on November bills. Commissioners, as you are aware, the budget appropriations are for each of our 4 utility systems, and so of that $894 million, $596 is for our electric division, $109 for our gas division, $73 for our water division, and $115 for our wastewater division, and I'll be talking more about that in a consolidated view as we move forward in these slides. But first, as we look, again, the budget is essentially level, up $5 million or 0.6% from last year. And of that, some of the key variances include a decrease in energy costs of $13 million that reflects lower natural gas commodity prices. Our O&M is up $5.4 million, and that's largely driven by increased expenses for labor-related expenses and also our increased contract prices and vegetation management. Also in that is a $4.7 million increase in capital expenditures, largely for that first year of grid modernization, including that $12 million for initial investment in the replacement of those advanced meters. Also, $6.4 million additional dollars for debt service related to $97 million in new bonds for fiscal year 17 that Mark will discuss in just a few moments, and then $1.6 million in increased taxes and equivalent payments related to the increased book value of those utility assets driven by our capital investments in Century 2, where we're replacing aging infrastructure. A little closer look at wholesale energy costs, which account for 52% of that total budget. Of that, $420 million will be for the purchase of 5.7 billion kilowatt hours of electric power from TVA to serve our 202,000 electric customers. And also, $47 million will be for the purchase and transportation of 9.6 million decatherms of natural gas to serve our 100,000 natural gas customers. As we look at O&M, $135 million accounts for about 15% of the total budget and allows us to continue to provide safe and reliable utility services to our customers. The labor-related costs account for about $62 million and support our budgeted staffing of about 978 full-time employees for fiscal year 17. 30% of the O&M costs are for outside services or those contracts associated with our operations and maintenance programs, things such as vegetation management, meter reading, and also our facilities maintenance. Materials and other costs account for about 24% or $32 million. Utilities and chemicals are largely consumed through the operations of our water and wastewater treatment plants. The stock materials at $4.2 million account for the maintenance materials associated with those activities, as well as our fuel costs. Of the $184 million capital budget investments for fiscal year 17, $80 million of that will be for our electric system, 46 for our wastewater system, 34 million for our water system, and 24 million for our natural gas system. Of that total budget, 87% or $159 million will be for system infrastructure. That's for the replacement, improvement, extension, and relocation of our utility assets. All the items there to the right of that slide are really the key components of those capital investments for fiscal year 17. Include investments in our Lonsdale and North Knox substations. That allows us to continue on the path of renewing our substations and modernizing them so we have that completed by the year 2025. It also includes 21 miles of electric transmission line improvements and the replacement of 2,600 utility poles. Also in that, 6 miles of natural gas main replacement, 17 miles of water main replacement, and 20 miles of wastewater main replacement in this budget when we look at our distribution and our collection system improvements. We're investing $15.3 million in plant improvements at MBW, Kauai, and at Fourth Creek. And also, I mentioned before, advanced meters include $12 million for the replacement of 46,000 meters, roughly 200 a day. And also part of the budget is a $2.3 million that we're investing in the compressed natural gas station that Gabe Bowles talked about last month. That's going to be relocated off Third Creek adjacent to our Hoskins Operations Center. And as you recall, construction on that begins this summer, with it being in operation by the end of the year and open to the public as early as January of 2017. So I'm looking forward to that. Our debt service of $74 million really reflects our investment in capital investments. When we look at that, of that $74 million, $41 million is for interest payments and $33 million for principal payments. 43% or $32 million is for payments for wastewater debt, $21 million for electric debt, 11 for water, and $10 million for gas debt payments. And the last component of our total budget includes $34 million in taxes and equivalents. And as you know, KUB is required by state law and also by city charter to pay in lieu of tax payments to the various taxing jurisdictions where our utility assets are located. So for that, we budgeted $18.6 million for payments to the city of Knoxville, $9.6 million to Knox County, and $900,000 to the other various taxing jurisdictions. And lastly, we've also budgeted $5 million for labor-related payments remitted to the federal government. And with that quick overview concludes the budget overview for fiscal year 17. And while Mark is preparing to come up to talk about the funding recommendations, equipment appropriations, I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have. Okay, thank you very much.
Commissioners, I'm just going to take a few moments and review for you the funding of the proposed $894 million budget. We do have it's actually 6 debt recommendations that we want to talk about as well, so I'll go into a little bit of detail on each of those, and then I'll close out by talking about our proposed commitment appropriations for fiscal year 2017, and I'll draw some distinctions between budget appropriations and commitment appropriations for you. Commissioners, in total, our system revenues combined projected for fiscal year 17 is $787 million. Again, that's all 4 utility systems combined. $782 million of that will fund our wholesale energy cost, O&M, our debt service payments, and our taxes and tax equivalent payments. $5 million of the $787 million will actually be going into our cash reserves for the 4 systems, and that's not actually part of a budget appropriation. That's just a transfer in between funds. So that's why I make the distinction 782 of 787. I'll also mention of the $787 million, $12 million of that is going to be coming from those 4 rate increases that will be effective during the upcoming fiscal year. That's their contribution to the $787 million. And as Mr. Williams mentioned, electric and water will be reflected on August bills, and gas and wastewater will be reflected on November bills. The capital budget for the year is $184 million, in addition to the $72 million in revenues that will help fund it. Also $97 million in bond proceeds and $15 million in general fund cash that will be coming from the electric and wastewater divisions to help fund their capital programs for the year. So in summary, the $894 million budget will be funded by $782 million in system revenue, $97 million in bonds, and $15 million in general fund cash. Commissioners, we'll talk about the debt now, and we've talked about this many times over the years that, as you well know, debt is a key component of our long-term funding strategy for each of our utility systems. We believe that using debt in a balanced manner is appropriate because it is spreading the cost of our long-lived utility system assets over both current and future customers, both of which benefit from those assets. And it also results in current rates being somewhat more affordable in the near term and the short term for current customers as well. We are proposing $97 million in bonds in total to help fund our capital budget for fiscal year 2017. That includes $40 million for electric bonds, $25 million water, $20 million wastewater, and $12 million for natural gas. I'll point out, consistent with the long-term funding plans of each of the divisions, these bonds will be amortized or paid back over a period of 30 years. And they'll have a levelized payback structure, which basically means it's going to be the same amount that's paid back each year for each series of bonds. The principal and interest combination changes, much like your home mortgages would, but the amount will stay the same over time. We budgeted an interest rate of 3.25% for each of the 4 series of bonds. As I stand here today, I would say that's a bit conservative. I looked yesterday at the markets, and I think if we were selling today, we could sell probably a little south of 3%, which would be good. But you may have heard that the Fed announced yesterday that they anticipate making some type of announcement in mid-June. I think June 14th and 15th is when the committee gets back together. I've seen probabilities in the journal this morning that as much as 55% of traders are now saying they expect some type of hike in interest rates, in which that was only 4% 2 days ago. So if indeed that happens, that would probably have, in all likelihood, some type of upward movement on these bond rates. I hope it would just maybe take us back to the budgeted interest rate and do no more than that. But we'll certainly have our eye on the markets as the next few weeks unfold. Also mentioned, as you probably well know, City Council authorization is required for each of these series of bonds. In accordance with state law, any debt that KUB issues with a final maturity greater than 5 years must have council approval. So we will be going to City Council on June the 21st and request authorization to issue these bonds. And we're targeting a sale date of early July. And I'll point out that that will be a public competitive sale that is conducted online. We receive bids from underwriters through a system called I-Deal, and then it automatically calculates what the true interest cost is for each of the deals, and that's who we awarded to, the bid with the lowest true interest cost. So that'll be coming up in probably early July. Commissioners, the next 4 charts I'm going to show you basically provide some detail of each of the 4 series of bonds, and I'll just go ahead and tell you I am obligated through our debt management policy to provide you certain facts and figures on each of these series of bonds. So we'll start with electric, and I'll just point out each of the next 4 charts will have a graph that shows the green portion of the bar chart will be the debt service associated with the proposed bonds, and then the other color, in this case red for electric, is the debt service or principal and interest on what's currently outstanding, again in this case for the electric division. So I'll try and go quickly through these 4. Electric, $40 million. The projected interest cost at 3 1/4 is $23.2 million. So total debt service over 30 years, you add the 2 together, that's $63 million. Amortize that over 30 years, it's $2.1 million per year. And that's the amount of this green, basically right here. Yes, ma'am.
I have what might be a stupid question, but I know those are accepted here, so I'm asking you that. So if you knew that the interest rates in when you're planning on selling these based on city council approval and putting the bonds out are going to change to 3.3%, but you know they're below 3% now, could you ever fast track it so that you could issue those to save $10 million, or, I mean, probably would be 10, but...
That's a very good question. We will try and move as fast as we can on this. The city council meeting that we'll go to is scheduled for the 21st, and then we'll have conversations with the rating agencies, and we'll get to market as soon as we can after that. We also have a refunding that we want to talk to you about here in just a few minutes, and part of the getting to city council is we have to file a report with the state comptroller's office on the refunding bonds, and they have up to 15 days to get back to us. I have to provide that to city council. That has to be in their hands before I can go over there, because I have to make a presentation on that at city council meeting for them to approve that. So there are some delays associated, not delays, but just some time factors associated with that. But we try to move as fast as we can.
But I'll remind you, was it last year or the year before, we were scheduled to go to the market in
Right,
the fall, and we moved it up to the summer because of exactly
Because we were
the same
anticipating
thing.
interest rates were going to
Yeah,
rise
so
in
we
the
try
fall.
to do it
Yeah.
to the extent we can. But it requires your approval first, and then these steps in city council, and then we get it, so.
Good question. And let's see, on the electric division, currently, well, with the $40 million in bonds, we'll have a total of $278 million in outstanding bonds with the electric division after this sale. That translates to a debt ratio of 44%. That is consistent with our long-term funding plan targets that the board has approved for the electric division long-term funding plan. Our debt management policy requires that at least 30% of electric bonds be repaid in the next 10 years. And you can see the percentage on that is 49%, so we meet that test. I'll also mention that our credit ratings on the electric system, we expect those strong ratings to be affirmed or reaffirmed as part of this sale of the bonds. And that's electric. Water is $25 million at the 3.25, that's $14.3 million in interest. You amortize that over 30 years, it's about $1.3 million per year. With the $25 million, that'll increase outstanding water debt to $169 million. Translates to a debt ratio of 49% for the water division, also consistent with our targets and our long-term funding plan for the water division. 35% of water bonds will be repaid in the next 10 years. That is in compliance with debt management policy. I will mention on our credit ratings, AAA for S&P, that's the highest rating available. We certainly hope that that's reaffirmed with the sale of bonds. AA2 for Moody's. That is actually 2 notches below Moody's equivalent for AAA. So we will be requesting and pushing for an upgrade to AA1 for Moody's for our water bonds. No guarantee it's going to happen. I asked last year, they said no. Never hurts to ask.
Tell me again what the debt ratio, the numerator is.
The numerator is just outstanding debt. So for example, for the water bonds, that's going to be 169 million would be the numerator. The denominator is going to be the debt plus the equity portion of the water system. If you looked at a balance sheet, that used to be known as accumulated earnings or retained earnings. And I don't know what that number is off the top of my head. It's a big number. You add those two together, that's really considered your total system funding. So debt divided by that total is your debt ratio. Commissioners, for wastewater, $20 million. Projected interest cost, $11.4 million. Amortize that over 30 years, it's $1.1 million for the water division. We do have a pretty large amount of wastewater debt right now, $492 million. $20 million will make it $512 million in total bonds outstanding for the wastewater division. Translates to a debt ratio of 64%. That is in line with our targets in our long-term plan of 65% or less.
And it just historically, for those of you who weren't on the board at the time, when we had the consent decree, we went to the rating agencies and talked to them about increasing this, and they support that. So this is in compliance with the discussions we had with them. It looks kind of out there, but it's expected when you have the kind of expenditures we have had.
That's right. We went to New York back in August of 2004 and met with Moody's and Standard & Poor's, laid out along. That was our first 10-year funding plan that we had back then. So we walked them through our new indicators and we made some changes on how we calculate our debt service coverage, and that our debt ratio was going to be going up. And since that time, though, we've had multiple upgrades from the agencies, because you can see for wastewater, for AA+ and AA2, that's pretty strong for having a debt ratio of 64%.
Can I ask you a question about the interest rate? If those interest rates go up, how will that affect our debt ratio and our intent to borrow to fulfill, your goals for the wastewater division? Are we, at 64% now? How much flexibility do we have within that, interest rate?
The interest rates will not affect the debt ratio, because that's just the principal amount of the outstanding debt that's going to impact the debt ratio. But the interest rates will impact these green bars, and if they go up, the amount of interest, that 11.4 million, could get higher and higher. That can have an impact on our wastewater financial plan. So we just have to look at our expenditures. If rates, you said, went to 4% or 5%, then part of our whole balanced way of looking at the plan, we've got to look back at our rate increases, we've got to look at our capital program to some degree, and as you take everything into consideration. Basically, it's a cost increase to the plan if that happens, and we've got to step back and take a look at how we manage that.
Yeah, I was just wondering, will a percent, say, make a big difference? Will 2% make it, or do we really
Not
know that?
necessarily for a $20 million bond issue, but if it stayed that way, and or continue to grow, and then we have a bond issue next year, and the next year, and the next year, it would have more than a compounded effect. But if it went up 4% on 20 million, that 11 million isn't going to change that much. It would increase somewhat, but it's not going to be that significant for the overall plan. We used to have issues back in the early days of the consent decree that were 70 million, 75 million. We actually had one that was 140 million when we were first starting out. So if you have an interest rate movement on that much principal, it's going to have an impact.
Thank you.
Commissioners, I'm sorry, on the natural gas, $12 million for gas bonds. Interest cost on that at 3 1/4, so about $7 million. We amortize that. That's about $635,000 over the life of the bonds. We'll add, with the $12 million, our total outstanding gas debt will be $114 million, debt ratio of 38%. I do want to point out one thing on this graph. It may looks a little different than the others. that you see these green bars all by themselves out here. Back in December of 2013, when the board formally endorsed a long-term funding plan for the gas division, the board decided to transition from going bond issues that have a 20-year maturity to a 30-year maturity. And this is the first bond issue we've actually had in gas since that resolution was adopted by the board. So as a result, you can now see these green bars out there by themselves, which indicates that this maturity is 30 years, whereas these in the past were based upon 20 years. That's also the reason that 57% of principal can be repaid in 10 years, because those prior bond issues had a shorter maturity. Okay, and that is the 4 bond issues that make up the $97 million. Wanted to talk briefly about our refinancing opportunity. Staff is also requesting the board authorize up to $22 million in refunding bonds for the purpose of refinancing outstanding water bonds at a lower interest rate. And basically, based upon current market rates, we would save $1.7 million over the life of the bonds, which is a little above 7% or more, 7% plus of the principal that would be refunded. So this is a good opportunity. City council authorization would be required for this as well. Would anticipate going at the same time as the $97 million and just take them all at one time. We would sell in early July. This would also be a public competitive sale. I mentioned earlier, one additional step on refunding bonds. We are required by state law to submit a plan of refunding to the state. Have to get it back. They have that 15 days. That's part of the issue, and we've set the council meeting for June 21st. So if the board approves this today, I'll be sending that refunding plan out this afternoon, and I'll be copying the board on that, so you will receive an email later today. I also send it to the mayor as well, because we issue bonds in the name of the city. They tend to respond directly to the city as opposed to us, and then the city sends it over to us. That's just part of the way the state handles things. And on the refunding, commissioners, really this bullet right here sums it all up, reducing the average interest rate on the bonds currently from 4.18 to 2.37%. That's about 180 basis points, which leads to the $1.7 million in savings. Now, one twist on this is not necessarily a simple refunding. This is what is known as going to be an advanced refunding. The bonds that we will be refinancing or refunding mature over the years 2020 to 2033. So this is part of bonds that were sold back in 2009, had a 10-year call provision. So the bonds can't be called from the bondholders to be redeemed until March 1st of 2019. IRS allows us to go ahead and refinance. It's called an advanced refunding. We set up an escrow with a bank. In this case, it would be Regions Bank probably. And we'll put the proceeds of these refunding bonds into the escrow. They're invested in high-grade U.S. government securities. March 1st, 2019 comes. What's in the fund is used to retire the debt from those bondholders at that point in time. Once we close on the escrow, these bonds are considered legally defeased from KUB's perspective, meaning they're no longer on our balance sheet, no longer counted in that debt ratio, basically. Any questions on the refinance? Commissioners, also to show you what our estimated cost of issuance are, this is for the $97 million and the $22 million combined. Here you see a listing of the various firms that we partner with for our bond sales, and our financial advisor is Cumberland Securities. Our bond counsel is Bassberry and Sims. The fees that you see here are probably going to be pretty close to what we would actually pay. We do have established contracts with both of those firms that have rates based upon the amount of bonds that you sell or refinance. So that's a pretty easy calculation. We also pay the rating agencies, Moody's and Standard & Poor's, for them rating our bonds. And those fees can somewhat be volatile. Sometimes you think there's a good basis for it, and then it comes in higher than you expect or lower than you expect. I'm not sure how they go about pricing what they charge us, but sometimes those seem like the most unreasonable of the fees. In total, $489,000. When you compare that to the refunded, when you compare that to the total principal par value of the bonds, it's 0.4%, and that's pretty competitive. It's consistent with our past transactions, A couple of months ago, I did a survey of fees that other Big 8 utilities pay that issue debt on a somewhat regular basis, and also local municipalities. And we were pleased to learn that we're among the lowest, if not the lowest, in fee rates that we have for financial advisor and bond counsel. So. Commissioners, moving on, this is an annual request at this time of year, and it is for a line of credit for the natural gas division that allows us to manage the seasonality of cash flow for the gas division. Basically, we sell about 80% of our natural gas during the winter heating season. Our other costs, purchase gas costs, O&M and capital, is more uniform over the course of the year. That can lead to a potential cash shortfall in the gas division general fund before you get to the heart of the winter heating season. So we do ask for this line of credit to help manage that potential cash shortfall. We are asking for up to $10 million. It will be bid, or we will take bids from local banks as we've had in the past, so it is a competitive assessment on that. We also have to get, before we can issue a notice of sale for the revenue anticipation note, we have to get approval from the state comptroller's office to issue it as well. And they're usually pretty prompt on that. And commissioners, this chart shows the projected cash flow of the end of month general fund balance for the natural gas division for FY17. That is reflected in the red line. And I'll just point out, by the end of November, right now we are projected to be about $2.5–3 million negative. So right now we're showing that we would need to use that line of credit. And this model or chart here basically shows we would draw $5 million of that $10 million and then pay it back by the end of February. That is one of the requirements of state law. When you issue a revenue anticipation note for this purpose, it can only have a one-year maturity. So essentially any balance that we draw down has to be repaid before the end of the fiscal year. So commissioners, the last two charts I have, switching gears a little bit from debt to talk about appropriations again. Commitment appropriations. This is, yes sir.
Before we shift gears, I didn't add it up. Tell me what our total debt will be after the issuance of these bonds.
It's going to be $1,073,000,000, a little short of $1.1 billion. By the time we get to the end of FY17, which those debt ratios are calculated on, it'll be a little bit less as we make some principal payments. And I think in John's chart it was 30-something million, 33 million, I believe, in principal payments. So that amount would come down. So you're going to be about 1.05 billion.
And Mark, one other question on the line of credit. When that line has to be drawn on, I don't think we had to draw, did we draw on it this year?
We did not have to.
When it's been a while, right, since we've had to draw on that?
That's correct. We had two actually colder winters in the past, and we didn't have to draw. It's been a couple of years.
When we do have to draw on it, is it done on a